Hello, welcome to Algorithms. My name is Saurabh. Today we are going to discuss about zero trust implementation. In this presentation, we are going to discuss about the architecture. It is a sample architecture, and then we are going to discuss some of the tools as well, that how you choose the architecture, how you implement the tools, and so on and so forth. So let's get into it. So this slide specifically is a carry forward from my first presentation on zero trust maturity framework. Those who have not gone through that presentation, I highly recommend to go through that, as you get to know about the zero trust maturity model, and that is basically a foundation. How do you go about it, and how do you assess your existing environment, and then rate yourself, where do you stand at this point of time from the maturity perspective, and then define what are the steps that you need to take in order to move forward. So we discussed about the zero trust scenarios. What are the different scenarios? Scenarios vary from one organization to another. We discussed about the zero trust across digital state as well. Now this is more of an end state architecture. So how your data, apps, infrastructure, network, identities, and device looks like, and what are the design principles that you have to consider in order to make sure that those are implemented. So when we say like data, so have you classified, have you labeled, have you encrypted the data? Similarly, when we talk about corporate devices and unmanaged devices, so your device risk and compliance state, how it is governed. Now device identity, do you have a centralized security policy enforcement, where your policies are evaluated in the real time? What does it mean is that you have a threat intelligence automation implemented within your organization to capture data from identity systems, to capture data from managed and unmanaged devices, to capture data from systems which are running on a data warehouse, applications, overall infrastructure. So for instance, if you are on premises or cloud, does not matter. So if you have cloud infrastructure plus on premises, you are collecting that data, and you are defining access and runtime control on those systems, plus the network data about your network delivery packets, so on and so forth. So that way is having a threat intelligence system, you have visibility across all the different components. And once you have the analytics implemented, you get to know about the different areas. Plus these tools are predictive in nature, so you know how do you need to control user behavior, and what are the areas that you need to focus more. Similarly, all the components in this architecture uh, are automated. So it does not mean that manual intervention is not required, it does. But at a high level, we are saying that this whole architecture is controlled by an automated environment, where the manual intervention is minimal. Scope and phases. Now, how do you structure your projects, and specifically the zero trust, because we that's the topic we are discussing about. And how do you divide the phases? Can you do the services part first, then device health, or do you need to do the identity first? So if you look at this slide deck, it is a kind of very structured and organized scope and phases, that what are the different items that you need to have in different phase. Like in terms of identity, you can put like a strong identity enforced for exchange, least privilege user rights. Similarly, all user accounts set up for a strong identity enforcement. So so this is basically the beginning of your zero trust journey. And and some of the organizations, I'm going to discuss about the tools as well. I don't want to cover tools in this slide, but we have a slide deck where we have mapped different tools. So when we are saying verify identity, uh, least privilege, user rights, strong identity enforced for exchange, how do you implement it, how do you map it with the tools? Similarly for device health, similarly for access verification, what are the tools you need? But these are the scope that, okay, once you complete these elements, then you go to the next. Some of them can be done in parallel as well, since it takes, like, it's not something that can be done in 6 months or 1 year. It takes a long time, maybe a multi-year journey to implement zero trust across your organization. Okay, but these are the major components, or the content of work to be performed in each phase of zero trust. Now, zero trust architecture, if you look at this architecture is using the Microsoft tools. So to implement zero trust, the primary component of this process are Intune for device management and device security policy configuration, Azure AD conditional access for device health validation, and Azure AD for user and device inventory. Now you see that we have mapped like Microsoft Intune, Azure Active Directory. Now we are talking about the tools. We are not talking about the concept. Similarly, we are talking about Office 365, Azure Application Proxy, and what are the access conditions like location, device state, user application, risk, exceptions, right? Similarly, what are the actions to be performed, whether it allows access or blocks access, and then the remediation recommended provided. So this is more of a continuous validation while access is granted. So this is more of a real-time implementation, that how things are moving in real time. So the system works with Intune, pushing device configuration requirements to the managed device. So here you see that the Microsoft Intune is implemented, and it is pushing device configuration requirements to the managed devices. The device then generates a statement of health, which is stored in Azure AD. When the device user requests access to a resource, the device health state is verified as a part of authentication exchange with Azure AD. So this is how it is implemented. So once you have the end state architecture, then you implement your phased approach, then you implement your specific area depending upon what you want to start with, and then map it with the tools, and then you can go to uh, other different layers as well. I guess this is it for this presentation from the implementation perspective. Uh, in the next slide, I'm going to cover some more topics on the zero trust, but I will be talking about one specific area. Just like in the beginning, I spoke about the foundational elements. So in the next presentations, I am going to cover just one foundational element. So for instance, when we are talking about identity and access management, so what should be the architecture, what are the tools that you need to implement, how the configuration looks like, how those logs looks like when we are talking about threat management from identity perspective. So that will be a very specific topic from the implementation perspective. The reason I took this approach is to make sure that whoever is watching this video understands the concept, the architecture, the toolkit, and so on and so forth, so it is easier for them to implement it. We are going to cover one maturity assessment as well. So we covered the maturity model, but not the maturity assessment. So I'm definitely going to cover maturity assessment, that how maturity assessment is done for the zero trust architecture or implementation in an organization, but that will be more of a generic approach rather than if you are a financial institution, the approach will be different. If you are an energy company, the approach will be different. But definitely, I'm going to cover one generic zero trust maturity assessment and how the output looks like so that it is helpful for you. Other than that, if you have any questions, please drop us an email, saurabh@algorithms.com, and you can call us as well if you have any specific question. And please, if you are watching these videos and if you feel that you are learning, please like it. If you want to provide any feedback, please put in the comments below. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.